So, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Coffee Chats. I'm your host, Alyssa Jackson, Director of the Snohomish STEM Network. Today's topic, housing for growth, is one of the most pressing issues for our communities, our workforce, and our economy. Here in Snohomish County, the median household income is about $108,000 per year. Yet the median home price is hovering around $740,000, which requires an annual income of roughly $175,000 to afford without being cost burdened. That's a gap of nearly $67,000 between what households earn and what they would need to comfortably purchase a typical home. Even when we look south to Pierce County or north to Skagit, where home prices are lower, the affordability threshold is still far above what most Snohomish County workers earn. In fact, households would need to look farther out into places like Lewis or Cowlitz counties before incomes here line up with local home prices there. This disconnect is more than a statistic. It represents families who can't put down roots, workers who face long commutes, and businesses struggling to attract and retain talent. Housing is not just a social issue, it's an economic one. And that's why we're here today, to explore solutions, hear from experts, and start bridging the gap between housing costs and workforce realities. So please join me in welcoming our panelists, Dr. Janice Green, Chair of the Future Workforce Alliance and President and CEO of Ascenda LLC, who brings a deep perspective on how housing intersects with workforce readiness and economic equity. We also are joined by Chris Collier, Government Relations Director of the Housing Authority of Snohomish County, or HASCO, with expertise in housing policy, affordability, and on-the-ground challenges families are experiencing today. We also are joined by Bobby Thompson, Executive Director of the Housing Consortium of Everett and Snohomish County, who has been a tireless advocate for affordable housing solutions and collaborative partnerships across our region. Thank you all for being here for this conversation. We're going to move straight into Q&A. And a reminder to those of us joining via Zoom, please enter any questions you may have in chat that are relevant for today's topic, and we will relay them to our guest speakers, time permitting. So let's kick things off by framing the big picture here. Chris, how are you seeing the housing landscape impact workforce availability and economic growth in Snohomish County?
Hi, thanks for having me here, Alyssa, and everyone. I think you really covered it well in the introduction in terms of how it's affecting the workforces. People aren't able to live here and that they're not able to set down roots. And as a result, you can look at a lot of data that shows people are commuting much, much further to get to and from their jobs. I see Mayor Rankin from Darrington is on the call. And so I'd point out that people also, the truth of the matter is that the town of Darrington's sale price for a single family home has gone from $100,000 20 years ago to over 400,000 right now. That's people living the saying, drive until you qualify. And so that's what people did. And Darrington is quite a drive. It's a lovely place, but it's quite a drive. Same thing for Skagit County or places further and far between. So it's it's a shocking opportunity cost for folks to drive until they qualify, whether it's for a place to own or a place to rent. It's time away from a variety of other pursuits. So I'll try to keep my answer short and just leave it there for now. But really, everything you said is accurate.
Drive until they qualify. Wow, that's
Haven't heard that for a while, have you?
Yeah, that really hits. Dr. Green, with the median household income around $108,000, yet the median home requiring closer to $175,000 to afford, what does this affordability gap mean for our region's competitiveness and long-term growth?
I think that affordability gap is, just not just a number. It's the difference between whether families can stay here or whether they must relocate. So a family earning even the median income with two working parents may find it hard to save for years and for home ownership, because it can be out of reach. So when you think about it, many people move, as already I already discussed, they move out to Whatcom County, they move out to more rural Snohomish County or Island Skagit County. So they move out where the housing costs are lower, but they're still high enough that they remain priced out. When families leave, children change schools and grandparents lose daily connections and employers lose stability. I think it's one of the main reasons that people will leave a position is because they're priced out of being close to their workplace and they need it becomes a problem for them. It becomes a problem for them if they have children in school. If there's an emergency, they can't get there. It becomes a problem that the transportation is limited or very expensive. So when you look at it all the way around, I think that we need to start thinking about, without action, we really risk losing not only a skilled workforce, but a civic and economic investment that comes with families who put down roots.
Yeah, that's well said. And Chris?
I have one follow-up there, just as I had a
Yeah.
moment more to think is, you know, two working parents might be able to rent affordably. Two working adults might be able to rent affordably in Snohomish County. But that's all you're ever going to do. You'll rent affordably. And I think renters today are acutely concerned about rapidly rising rent prices. It's not a given. Rent has plateaued in the last couple of years. I'll get into that later. But if you're in that circumstance of being a renter, I don't think that you would feel very secure. You don't feel like your rent isn't going anywhere. And so you're always going to be looking for a chance to move. And as that pertains to economic activity and employment and talent retention, if you have a worker who's renting and that's all they're ever able to do with the wage they're currently making, they're going to be looking to move. They're going to be looking for an upgrade. And that translates to instability in your workforce as a local employer. Just something to keep in mind. It's like they can rent affordably. It's like, but they're going to they're going to try to be climbing that ladder for really good reasons because they don't feel secure.
Yeah,
Right.
and I also want to emphasize the single parents or the people that with one income, and that's
Mhm.
a whole nother story because they are really blocked out of housing or purchasing houses. They do rent, and rent rises
Right.
so rapidly. There's not a control on rent, so it just
Yeah. Yeah, multifaceted there. Thanks for that. Bobby, let's bring you in on this. What unique barriers do low and moderate income workers face when trying to find housing near employment centers in our region?
Well, I think what Chris and Dr. Green both did a good job of talking about is just really, a lack of available affordable housing stock in primary employment centers. And so I think that having just gone through and worked very directly with the city of Everett and the work their staff did in updating their comprehensive plan, I think it's important to note that as the example, the city of Everett has about 80,000 existing housing units that they've created over the course of 100 plus years. Their comprehensive plan to 2044 calls for the creation of 38,500 units in the next 19 years. So the call is to create almost half of the city's existing housing stock in less than 20% of the time. And so that emphasizes the need of population growth and the need that we have in this place to house folks. And then on top of that, the need for affordable households is about 13,000 units plus of that 38.5. So I think that there's fears with that, just scarcity. I think that potential displacement as opportunity centers develop and grow for passively occurring affordable housing is a huge threat, especially as we look at TOD centric nodes and development around those. And I think the impact it has on affordable families is just the amenities that they need. And Dr. Green referenced this, whether it's childcare options, access to amenities and services, additional transportation costs. I think the lack of ability for mobility is really a big thing in regards to just increasing and growing our workforce to further develop. And so I think these are things we all need to be aware of as we look at what these barriers are for folks that are trying to kind of increase and grow in the career in their career path and their journeys.
Yeah, and hopefully here in Snohomish County. Can you clarify? You said TOD. What is that? Can you?
Transit oriented development. So
Okay.
it's definitely a terminology as light rail expansion comes north of Linwood over the next 12 to 13 years. Hopefully, fingers crossed. That is something that will be a hot center around development around that corridor and really around everything that we're doing in regards to the future development of not only our workforce development scale in Snohomish County, but the housing that will go along with that.
Definitely. Workforce needs housing. And what a great setup here for Dr. Green's next question. Dr. Green, how is the housing affordability crisis affecting our ability to attract and retain talent across all industries?
Well, I don't believe competitive wages alone can,
Mm.
they can't overcome housing costs. Even with salaries in the figures, many families cannot buy in Snohomish County. Um, it's difficult for the families. In healthcare education, I've met some professionals that leave their positions within a year or so because they cannot afford the rent, or they can't afford to be near their workplaces. So I think that we need to pay particular attention to those types of situations. I also think that, they since they can't afford to rent near their workplaces or live near their workplaces, I think, and also know that HUD sets a fair market value of two-bedroom house in our county at $2,671 per month. So for a household earning median income, that's roughly 30% of their monthly budget.
Yeah.
And this is a tipping point for affordability. So a teacher or nurse may decide that the pay is fair, but the housing options are not. In construction and manufacturing, workers often drive up to 60 miles and maybe even more, adding hundreds of dollars each month for fuel and taking time away from family. So this becomes a competitive issue across the board when people have to commute long distances instead of raising their families and children and living in the communities they serve. So that reality, I believe, makes recruitment and retention increasingly difficult and fragile.
Yeah. And yes, some of the specific call-outs there to how far those industries are driving. That's great information. Thank you. Chris, circling back to you, how do housing affordability challenges intersect with workforce shortages in sectors like healthcare, education, and construction? Dr. Green touched on this.
Yep.
What do you have to add to that?
I can add, so I just looked it up. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that the median wage for a carpenter in the Seattle metro region, so this is Snohomish, King, Pierce County, the profession of carpentry, and the median wage for that occupation is $76,000 a year, which isn't a bad wage, but it's half of what you need, less than half of what you need to actually own a house, afford the median house. And we're talking mid-career wages. We're talking median wage, not starting wage, not apprentice, not journeyman. This is the middle of your career as a carpenter, and you're looking at $76,000 a year. You're not even renting affordably with that. Let's see, we'll look up childcare workers. This is the one that underlies all of these. So you didn't ask about childcare, but if you're a carpenter and you have kids, you might be needing childcare. A childcare worker in the Seattle metro makes $40,000 a year.
Mm.
Like, there's your problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of it. Then there's only 2,200 people working in the profession of childcare. So other things like nurses, registered nurses, a registered nurse makes $118,000 a year. That's great. That's a pretty good wage. And with dual income, you might be closing in on being able to afford a condominium or a townhome somewhere. You might be living in Lake Stevens and commuting down to Bellevue. But maybe you can own something. But think about all of the professions that are underneath or, that are behind a registered nurse that make the hospital or the clinic run. Technologists, radiologists, orderlies, all of the people that make that work. Certainly back to carpentry, you've got helpers, right? Just kind of maybe that's the apprentices, the journeymen. There's a lot of occupations that are up and coming that you can clearly show if you have been in this job in this area for a long time, relatively speaking, for the last 20 years, you might be doing okay. You might be kind of right on the margins. But I think what really concerns me is attracting new labor, that gap that we experience with, like, who are the new people coming into this profession to take up the job of folks that retire. And you can clearly show that it's not an attractive place to try and start your career. And in any profession, carpentry, construction, teaching, childcare, certainly. The list just goes on and on. So I'm not
Yeah.
sure if that really answers the question, but uh, certainly
Yeah,
you can look at all the occupations and say, oh, it's really hard to start your career as a carpenter. Here, give me 1 second and I'll tell you what they make at the 25th percentile for
okay.
carpentry is $60,000 a year, right? You're not
Mm.
going to attract someone to that wage, to that occupation. So
Mhm.
it's hard to attract talent.
Well, and you touched on the intersectionality of the different industries and careers that overlap in childcare. We actually, last month's coffee chat was on childcare and how the lack of childcare is impacting our
There you
economy and
go.
our workforce. So you touched on the wages there for the childcare providers, and that's if you can find them too.
Right,
You might have to drive even further. So we're talking about commute times to your work, but also maybe commuting to where you can, where childcare is available or where you can afford it.
right. Or where it's available. I mean, the wait list, I've got a 2.5-year-old, it's like we signed up for childcare a year and a half ago,
Mm,
right? Just to make sure that we were on the waiting list. And if you can't do that, if they can introduce so much chaos into your life that makes everything else harder.
yeah.
And that chaos or that stress in a worker's life is introduced by not having enough people to make childcare something that you can make it less confusing, less unpredictable.
Less
And
unpredictable.
that's something that we don't, it's hard to take that and then extrapolate that out to life is hard, or it's hard to attract or retain workers. But, those are the sorts of things that are a couple layers down that are kind of
Yeah.
hidden because they're just so far away from our day-to-day consciousness. But,
So
as we feel
stability.
like, yeah, it's instability. And as we look
Yeah.
around and say like, things aren't working very well. Like it's
Hmm.
things like that are kind of lurking under the surface, just sort of corroding underneath the fabric of how society is working, in my opinion. Getting a little excited in my language here. Just, it's those sorts of things that are going to make life harder.
Hmm. Dr. Green, we were just talking about some of the instability, the impacts that from the how unaffordable housing. What kind of workers or industries are being hit hardest by some of this housing instability or long commutes? We touched on a few of them. Do you have any more to add? And maybe how does that ripple through our local economy?
Yeah, I think Chris hit a lot of it. And I want to say something about childcare as well, even though
Yeah.
they're lower wages, they receive lower wages. If you have to, childcare is very expensive
Hmm.
for the people that live here and work here. So I think where I see some of the biggest impacts are healthcare support, early education, like you said, caregiving, trades and service industries, places are all being hit very hard because these roles keep our community functioning, but wages are rarely stretched to the point to meet rising rents or home ownership. And I think that Chris did a good job covering that.
Yeah.
So a childcare worker may spend half her paycheck on rent. A nursing aide may be commuting back and forth from Skagit County or from some other place, and that's going to take a toll on their expenses with gas and other things. And a service worker, facing the rent hikes, and there's not a control on the rent hikes. I think that there may be a new control, legislative control, but still, those costs consume most of the income of a lot of the people that live and work here. So you're forcing children to leave their schools and their friends because people move. They may have to move mid-year in order to meet their requirements for paying rent. So when you look at that, we talked about instability and disruption. So business struggle with turnover, local spending power drops, and transportation systems become more congested. So with foundational workers, when they can't live near their workplace, the whole community and the economy feels estranged. It feels estranged, excuse me. My voice, I have a little bit of allergy thing going on here, but so it meets, it strains the community, it strains the economy. And so it makes a difference when people can actually have housing.
Have housing. Yeah. And we've actually got a great question here in the chat. So Robin Curtis from Express Employment, staying on the topic here of workforce, her question is, working in staffing, we see a huge difference in people looking for work versus employers hiring. Candidates want more than what employers are offering. the pandemic caused a huge shift in the economy with this, specifically what the salary is being offered versus what people need to live. How can this be adjusted to better the situation for everyone?
I think that that's going to be an issue, but I also think that with that there's going to be some hard work that we need to do as a community and with employers and with Future Workforce Alliance. I think we need to bring all of those together and see what we can do, because I understand why employees need, are having a larger request. They need more funding. They need more, they have to go further with the paycheck than they had in the past. They do have their child care that they have to pay for. Their rent is exorbitant. So of course they're looking for wages that sustain their standard of living. And then on the other hand, you have the employers that are looking at it from a different perspective, because they're in it for they want a return on their investment. They're in it to make money. So at this point, we're in a place, and I think it's critical enough that we have to have those hard conversations about what makes the community effective and successful, because we can't do one without the other. It has to be some type of collaborative effort.
Yeah, a collaborative effort indeed. We touched on some of the homeownership for lower income folks earlier, and we see there's a question in the chat from Mayor Frizzell. So I'll open this up for anyone here. We talk about attracting higher wage jobs in our county. Does that negatively impact homeownership for lower income people?
I mean, I was working on an answer in the chat, and I'll hesitate to say yes, unfortunately. I mean, think, for example, of if Amazon adds 10,000 jobs, Herald reports tomorrow, Amazon adds 10,000 jobs in South Lake Union. Everyone goes, oh, crap, there goes the housing market again, some more. That shouldn't, though, be something that we're afraid of. Like, attracting high-tech, high-wage jobs is not a bad thing, and I don't think that's what Mayor Frizzell intended with her question. But absent addressing the supply side of housing at the same time, it's going to have a negative effect. It's not something that we should avoid prosperity in the context of higher wage, higher tech jobs. I'm thinking also of the Sustainable Aerospace Fuels Initiative in South Everett. Those are jobs, and that's economic activity that I personally would really like to see in Snohomish County. But we need to have housing that goes hand in glove with it. And so often, kind of, we as society, speaking very generally, say like, yay jobs, and like, but where's the housing? Like, well, we sort of shy away from that. So that's really the answer, is like, yay jobs, and like, let's give those jobs a place to sleep at night. And everybody else that doesn't make as much as those high-tech jobs, so they can still stay in the community. Because the high-tech job brings, what's the rule of thumb, like 2 or 3 other service sector or equivalent jobs with them. That's a good thing. That's all good, as long as we provide adequate housing.
Yeah, I think we're going to.
Oh, sorry. I would just add to the second part of Mayor Frizzell's question. It's something I think we're going to touch on later on, but it's just the piece of, I think we need to have much more intentionality around systems to create home ownership opportunities for those in kind of the middle of the lower income brackets. I think there's a real potential for collaboration and partnership with municipalities on creating systems that better facilitate that. And we can expand on that later, but I didn't want that part to get lost as well.
Dr. Green, did you have something else to add to that one?
No, I was going to say something similar to what Bobby said. I think we're going to have to be very intentional about housing.
Yeah. And, there's another component here of all the jobs and workforce, education. And Mayor Frizzell has a follow-up here about how does education fit into the equation? As people become more educated, they can qualify for higher income jobs. Can we push an education emphasis so that people become more valuable to employers? And I see, Chris, you did a reply in chat, but anything out loud here?
Just speaking out loud is, yes. The only thing that I would add, education is a great thing. But if someone leaves their grocery store clerk job at Fred Meyer on 196, knowing that's in Mayor Frizzell's city, that job still remains. Like, if I get a better education and I leverage that into a higher paying job, that job that I left still exists. Someone still needs to stock that shelf, and that wage is still going to be paid to somebody. So yes, and I hate to say that, but it's something to, if I tend to look at the number of jobs that we have, not necessarily the people that are in them, because someone's going to fill that job, whether it's me or the person behind me or whatever. Just food for thought.
Yeah.
I think education is important for the next level, and this can be post-secondary education. It can be the trades, it can be certificates. I think WorkSource and Workforce are doing an excellent job of providing opportunities for people to move up the ladder. And I think we need to pay attention to those positions that don't necessarily have a career path, because sometimes people are channeled into those positions. I say some of the um, like nursing assistants and other types of positions, the positions you're talking about, clerks. So we need to be really intentional about how we provide career paths for people in positions, so that they can move up that ladder.
Yeah. The intentionality, the collaboration, the multi-pronged approach. We've got some more in chat about how we need the solution needs to be multi-pronged, and yes, it does. There's another comment in chat talking about middle housing. Maybe middle housing is a good way to ease the housing crisis. We see some thumbs up here. Any comments on middle housing or creating more affordable units for middle housing, low-income families?
Middle housing, good.
Middle housing, good.
You know, the
Okay.
one thing that people say is like middle housing, it brings a house that's like $700,000. That's not affordable. That's true, but it's the upgrade opportunity for a family that's currently, or household that's currently in a fixer-upper home that wants to buy something new. It's also the lateral move for a senior household that might want to downgrade. It might be the starter opportunity, or kind of that first. Middle housing, newly produced housing is never going to be affordable to 60% of the area median income, a household making like $80,000 a year or less. That's just not going to happen. But it frees up a lot of movement potential in the housing market. As much as people will look at the sale price of those middle density homes in bulk, it's not a bad thing. It's not unexpected. It allows, for example, your first time home buyers to move out of their apartment, which they currently can't do.
And by and large, it's missing right now in our housing landscape. So it's a missing piece of the puzzle right now that we're working to mitigate.
Great. Great comments. Thanks for all the comments and questions in chat. Please keep them coming. Let's shift gears into policy and planning. Up first, we got Chris. Chris, if we're looking at nearby counties, none of our immediate neighbors offer relief. Pierce County requires $142,000 in wages. Skagit requires $153,000 in wages to afford a home. What role can county and city policy play in narrowing this gap without pushing workers further away?
Yep. It's a non-point answer. There's not one specific thing that we can do. It's a lot of little things that we can do. And this is as much my question as it is Bobby's as a former developer. But I would say things like, just the one example that's kind of top of my mind right now is permit concurrence. Instead of doing permits sequentially, allowing all permits to be reviewed concurrently by various departments at a city or the county. That's an option. It introduces some risk and potential for some confusion. It's not something that just happens by accident, but those are the sorts of things that reduce time carrying costs on property and development. The other thing that I'll say more abstractly is thinking as an elected official, city or county or staff, getting your direction from elected official. What is the city or county's priority? Is it housing? Is it trees? Is it environment? Is it this? Is it that? Is it whatever? Where does housing rank as you think about code and policy changes, large and small? Are you aiming your code and policy changes at housing, at this, at that, at the other thing? Traditionally, we have kind of piled everything onto housing and said, well, housing will just sort of exist. If the market demands it, it'll exist. And clearly we're living the reality that that's not true. So as you think about future code and policy changes, thinking about the balancing act between, is this going to support or inhibit the creation of housing, whether it's a tree ordinance, whether it's something as small as a setback, or the size of the electrical vault, or the garbage room, or whatever. All those little things add up into how many units are going to be on the site, and asking that question always with every policy. in front of the city council or county council is, is this going to make it easier or harder to build housing? There's a time to make it harder. There's a time and a place for that to happen. It's not always the time, right? Sometimes we do want things to be easier to build housing. And so I can't be more specific than that because, every city is different. But I think that just holding that close as a city council, as a mayor, as a planning staff is very valuable and important as we seek to ameliorate this.
Yeah, thanks. Bobby, did you have anything to add to that one? I thought I saw him come off mute for a second. No, okay, we'll move to the next. There's a question in chat here, so I'm going to open this to the panel here. Can the MFTE program be expanded to help small developers produce more affordable middle housing and infill land? And if you could explain a little bit what the MFTE program might be.
Yeah. You want me to take this? Bobby, you want to do it? I'll do it. Okay, so really fast, the multifamily tax exemption program gives a tax abatement for 8 to 12 years, depending on if the developer provides affordable housing. That's 20% of the units are for 80% area median income housing, 80% or 115% area median income. So it's a tax abatement for property tax abatement for 8 to 12 years. I think I can certainly envision a way in which the multifamily tax exemption policy could support that. I think that's more a question for our state elected officials than me, but I could certainly envision that. I mean, if you said, Chris, write the amendment to the MFTE RCW, sure, I could do that. The question is then, can we get it through Olympia?
I mean,
But certainly.
there's no question that it could be a viable tool in the toolkit for developers and a solution in meeting need. So Ishmael brings up a very valid question that we've talked about frequently. So yeah.
Part of the multi-prong approach to solutions here. Okay, Bobby, let's stay with you for this next question. As the head of the housing consortium, how are local housing providers adapting to meet the needs of today's workforce, and what support do they need to scale those efforts?
Yeah, I think that there's been a real response with our nonprofit affordable housing developers in the last decade plus in how they've really seen this issue. They've gotten in front of it in a lot of ways. Obviously, I think there's been a lot of efforts to develop mixed income projects that meet various touch points of kind of the income scale. I think that intentionality behind collaboration and partnerships to create vocational opportunities. I think of Housing Hope's Hope Workstation project in regards to combining vocational training and job opportunities. Not everyone's path is a traditional go to college, get education. A lot of folks just need soft skill sets and other things to get in the workforce and be viable to kind of grow and enhance themselves. So I think that there's VOA has also been a leader in this space, just with intentionality about it, like really providing the housing piece and combining that with the workforce training. I think that we're seeing other developers start to really be proactive about combining amenity space that really helps the viability to kind of create the needs of our workforce. A lot of projects right now having healthcare capacity built into the housing sites. So it's an amenity where it takes away the need for the coordination for residents that are fighting for so many other things, whether that's just the monthly ability to pay rent and in childcare and all these other things, having those systems right in place. So it kind of eliminates a barrier of access. I think that we need to continue to do a better job and really continue to have honest conversations, though, about how we can best be looking to leverage our public funding sources locally and to really create and meet need. And really, I think something that we're not great at yet regionally is really bringing in private investment and private business to help make workforce housing more viable and feasible. I would say the glass half full approach to that is there's a lot of opportunity to be had. And I think that as we kind of go through this a little more, we can kind of expand on that. But those would be the baseline things of what I would see. I don't know if Chris or Dr. Green has anything to add to that, but yeah.
It's one thing that I would just add for our nonprofit providers and developers is oftentimes, traditionally in the last 2 decades plus, we've often expected your nonprofit builders to provide for the hardest to serve, with the assumption that subsidy dollars will just be there to support the operations and maintenance of a property, whatever that may be. I mean, remember, you're providing housing for people that basically can't pay any or much of the rent. So how are you going to close that gap between providing that housing, which is necessary and needed, and just keeping the property standing? Something that I've been mentioning more and more is, as we see basically attempts to pull back subsidy dollars floating around in one space or another, is don't be afraid. Certainly, as we look at the number of market rate or market rate adjacent units in Snohomish County that we need, don't be afraid to mix some higher market rate units in to close that gap. And that's a really big just shift in thinking for your nonprofit providers. Like, wait, we should do that. We can do that. Like, yes, you can and you should, because the subsidy dollars ain't coming from anywhere else. You've got to kind of support yourself, which is easier said than done, but as a starting point.
Yeah, easier said than done. You said that about a lot of things. Um, taking a look at chat, we got a few more questions in here, and me being from the Snohomish STEM Network, I see some shout outs to our higher ed partners. So WSU Everett and Edmonds College, located in Linwood. Yes, great partners and collaboration for education and training. So we've got a question here from Merritt. Are there any examples in Washington where jurisdiction has implemented a community land trust for home ownership opportunities? And Chris, I think I saw your reply to that. Can you
Yeah.
share with the
Basically Habitat for Humanity, and I'm looking for others, but I think in chat, Colleen Temple suggested reaching out to Kim Toski, and I think she would be the right person to answer that question better than I could.
Okay, great. Come back to Ishmael. Land is becoming more and more expansive. Is there any consideration to utilize the land bank for middle affordable housing? See some head nods here.
I've had discussions that are active right now of trying to stand up a method of land banking. Yes. I've described it as how this is stepping away from that question specifically. I'll come back to it. Is how does a city or county make a sub-area plan effective? Like, you can't, once you make your sub-area plan, just sort of like, okay, well, like here's the table, it's all set. Like, how do I actually drive change through to make this sub-area plan successful? This concept of a land bank is one that would allow for some intentionality, not complete control. You're not in charge of development, but it would allow for some intentionality of assembling the land and then making sure that it's sold or dispersed to someone that would then use it for that intended purpose, and kind of put plan into action, which I think is a big missing piece for cities. As you say, we've got our sub-area plan, now what? I look in particular around light rail stations. The now what question looms large. So that land banks are a active discussion to try and make that a reality, but it's just a discussion right now.
Okay. I see a couple more in chat. Let's see, maybe we could touch on this briefly about, I know some developers are willing to build affordable housing and contribute to the community even with low ROI. Are there opportunities for this? I think you touched on some. Do you want to resurface any?
I'd have to think more.
Okay. Yeah.
That's an email.
Okay, that's an email. Okay. And let's see, Frank has got, kind of wants to circle back to our earlier conversations about wages, lack of supply. Could we discuss new wealth creation opportunities for renters rather than relying on the notion of housing as generational wealth? There might be a few questions in here. Maybe old models contributed to the problem. Maybe there's a desire to want it all, but not accounting for the cost factor. Who pays for this higher quality? I think there's a lot touching on that. Any brief comments on that, or we might be covering that in these kind of next questions we're moving into?
I think some of them will get addressed, but
okay.
Frank's always bringing heat. I appreciate him.
Bringing the heat, Frank. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Green, let's pull you in on this. What would you like to local and state legislators to better understand about the connection between housing and workforce readiness?
Well, I think a lot of them do understand. I've seen some great work going forward, but housing, as far as workforce, it's infrastructure. It's an infrastructure. We cannot grow economy without roads or broadband, just like we cannot grow it without stable, affordable homes. So every training program that we have with apprenticeships depends on housing as its foundation. If
Mhm.
graduates can't find a place to live, the workforce pipeline it collapses.
Oh,
A student completing apprenticeships in Everett may have to move out. We've discussed that before, further out, and makes it impossible for local jobs that they train for. So overall, I think that it just disrupts not having housing disrupts education, community ties. And right now, as we see, and I'm just going to bring this up, we didn't talk about it much, but we have a lot of seniors on fixed incomes. They spend more than a third of their social security check on housing. And that
mhm.
forces trade-offs between rent, medicine, food. And I think legislators need to integrate housing benchmarks into workforce programs and fundable, affordable developments near job centers. So workforce readiness, begins in a safe, stable home environment.
Yep, fully supported. Okay, Bobby, we're going to shift gears a little bit and talking about the rental market. While the median home requires roughly $175,000 in income to purchase, the average Snohomish County rental costs only 16 to 20% of that median household income. What does this tell us about the role of the rental market in meeting housing, workforce housing needs?
Well, I think that it's vital. I think that
Vital. Yeah.
it's essential. I mean, I think that our collective ability to, protect and affordability and prevent displacement in our market is really dictated on whether, it directly affects whether Snohomish County employers can attract and retain workers. Um, rental units, as we've talked about, much more accessible than ownership opportunities in our current landscape. It means that most of our workforce is going to rely and depend on that rental housing stock to live near jobs, build their household capacity financially, which will in turn over time increase their equity and their future mobility options. So I think that, Chris and I talk about this often. I've heard him as everyone's hearing today, he does a great job of saying we just need housing. And I think that we need to, I think even just stressing the importance of increasing our housing stock and supply in the rental space. We need to have, trust me, my every day is focused intentionally on the affordable housing piece of that. But even the creation of market rate housing has a very positive impact on the affordable housing space as we create opportunity. So we're going to continue to follow through on increasing our affordable housing and rental supply. But as I said earlier too, I just think this has to be done in concert, to Mayor Frizzell's comments earlier about exploring and developing affordable homeownership models such as community land trusts, co-ops, that can be built in partnership with support from both the state and municipal levels. There are very viable rural homeownership programs that are in operation historically. We are not good at developing urban homeownership models at scale. And there's not really a viable infrastructure in place, both with, acquisition cost support, a program for helping homeowners streamline financing opportunities with potential developers. And so I just think that there are some, I know municipalities sometimes have tools in their toolkit that they're not even aware of, that they could be potentially leveraging in different ways to kind of help meet this need. So I would love to see both those pieces kind of get addressed over time. But yes, our ability to have more rental housing is essential to expand and better support those in our workforce.
Um, that's great. And you make up a good point about maybe municipalities might not even know the tools in their toolkit or tools that are available to them. There's just so many layers to this. A couple of questions in chat here. I'm not sure which city we're talking about, but has the city pondered the issue of allowing existing parks land that are undeveloped or underutilized into affordable housing? And I'm just going to marry that with the second question of what current opportunities and barriers to converting apartment communities to condos? So, Bobby, you got any insight on those two?
I would, without betraying the trust of all the cities in Snohomish County, I would say that there are very thoughtful discussions always going on around are available whether it's surplus land, whether it's public space, in regards to trying to meet this need. So I think that land availability in general is maybe the biggest pillar in regards to mitigating the ability to, or the barriers that we face in trying to create future opportunities. So I think we have very thoughtful leaders that are examining all options on the table. And I would encourage you to reach out to your individual cities and ask them those questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing that I'll add is specifically, is I'm just a note, not saying it's good, bad, or other, but the city of Edmonds recently broached that subject, disposal of two parks, and it triggered a firestorm. I would say that's a politically hazardous place to go, as well-intentioned as it might be, but tread with caution. Certainly, I would add is you create more housing that's likely has little to no outdoor green space, sequestered for the specific unit, the value of parks is going to go up. So I would be hesitant to really lean in on the idea of parkland. Surplus land that's not a park is a different topic. But parks, I would tread with great caution. And I see a lot of elected heads nodding understandingly.
Yeah. What about the question on opportunities and barriers for converting apartment communities to condos? Any follow-ups on that?
That's outside my
Okay.
scope right now, but I could research it.
Yeah, I'd say I'd be happy to follow up on that one. It's a deeper, it could lead us down a different path.
Okay. Fair enough. And Chris, I did see you dropped in the chat some tools on the toolkit,
Yeah.
an exhaustive list there. So thank you. And all these resources will be shared out in the follow-up email after this afternoon. So staying in the rental market, and Bobby, this one is still with you. HUD's fair market rent for 2 bedroom is about $2,500 a month, close to 28% of the median income. For larger families, costs rise much higher. How are rising rents impacting different household types, particularly families with children or seniors on fixed income? I think Dr. Green brought that up earlier too.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing is that you're you're ending up with a lot of unintended consequences. A lot of families are they are now becoming multi-generational households
Mm-hmm.
where everyone is doubling up.
Mm-hmm.
You have, I think I know there's a number of members in our membership that are developing units that are 4 bedroom apartments, some now doing 5 bedroom apartments,
Wow.
to kind of meet this need. So it's just based on the sheer fact that a household of 4 or 5, traditional household, cannot afford that 2 bedroom rent you just demonstrated there, because
Mm-hmm.
probably for all of us, when you read, like when you hear that, the idea that a 2 bedroom unit is $2,500 is pretty jaw-dropping, but that's our reality.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other piece that you talked about there with seniors, on fixed incomes, this is the biggest void right now, I feel, in our affordable housing landscape. We had Senior Services of Snohomish County was a preeminent developer for forever. They ceased housing development activities in 2011, and I'll tell you that no affordable senior units were basically created in Snohomish County for a decade. There are a number of projects that are ongoing now and are, either in pre-development or under construction. But that is the biggest void that we have in this space, is trying to find affordable opportunities for our seniors. So yeah, we have a lot of work to do in that realm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Chris just dropped in chat about 9 years ago he paid $14.25 a month for a 2 bedroom. So that's the difference over 9 years. Dr. Green?
No, I was just going to reemphasize that with seniors and with what we see coming from the federal government with cuts in Medicaid, Medicare, and other, this is all interconnected. And what we're facing right now is going to be a real barrier, for seniors in housing and other low income, because there's not going to be the subsidies that we've had in the past. So that's why I think we need to start thinking overall as a community, how we address this, because we see it coming at us, and we're going to just have to figure out how we're going to manage through.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I'm going to toss this next one here for Chris. Chris, for many in our region, renting is the only viable option, but it doesn't build equity over time. How does the continued reliance on the rental market affect long-term workforce stability and retention, especially for workers hoping to stay and grow in the community?
Yeah, it's something I touched on a little bit at the top is, you know, if you
Yeah.
have workers that are renters, they're going to be looking to move because they don't feel safe. Rents have something that I can add there is that rents have come down from 2023 to today have come down by about 10%. So that's good.
Yeah.
But rent is still 44% higher than it was 20 years ago. That's bad. You
Yes.
know, it's
That is bad.
like you can, depending on when you start counting, you can say like, oh, things are better or things are worse. You know, taking the long view, things are much harder today for renters. Again, 44% higher. Rent is 44% higher than it was actually just in 2014. Rent was flat from 2013 to 2000, sorry, 2000 to 2013. Adjusted for inflation, rent did not go up in Snohomish County.
Hmm.
Since 2014, it's gone up by now 44% in total, and it was higher last year. So it's 2 years ago it was higher. So and it's come down a smidgen since then. But it's
And we
just
are feeling
that's just instability in the labor market. It's something that I can also chip in here is from the Providence Institute for Healthier Communities, the last community pulse survey that they did last year, 2 years ago. The survey response for folks that were struggling with, you know, through the lens of income, you know, what do you need? The response was not, I need housing costs to be lower. That, you know, kind of that question had a very low positive response rate. That what had a very high positive response rate was, I need a better job. And so my interpretation of this data is that workers, employees are saying, it's my responsibility to succeed in this market, which is a very American, you know, approach to adversity is it's my problem, so I got to fix it. It's very
it.
independent. But that leads to instabilities because people are chasing higher and higher wage jobs. As I mentioned before, leaving that grocery store clerk or barista or childcare worker job to be filled by somebody else. And so that instability, that societal challenge will persist, even if an individual gets educated or whatever, gets lucky and graduates to a higher paying job. But certainly it's workforce instability. And if you're worried about retaining your workforce, if you've got someone is really great and they've been there for 3 or 4 years and you're worried that they're going to leave, like you should be worried because they're probably internalizing their struggle in the housing market as I need a better job. I need to look out for myself and find a place that'll pay me more, which is fine for them to do. But as a society, that's not a great thing. Like job
Which
hopping
is,
is the name of the game for millennials, my generation. Job
yeah.
hopping, don't stay in a place for more than 2 to 3 years or you're standing still, you're dying.
Yeah.
That's not a great approach for a lot of reasons.
Well, and that's why we need some of the multi-pronged solutions that we heard earlier. We only have a couple minutes left on here. I want to get two more questions out. Chris and or excuse me, Bobby and Dr. Green. Dr. Green, I'm going to start with you. Let's talk about some solutions and partnerships. Dr. Green, how are you seeing workforce developments maybe align or not align with housing planning in our region? From your vantage point with the Future Workforce Alliance, what strategies are being used to better coordinate talent pipelines with housing access?
Yeah, I think we can increase that activity. The collaboration can be increased. Since all of this, as I said, is interconnected, we know that workforce is impacted by housing. We know that, all of this in our community is going to make a difference. So if we don't have a place to live near the workplace, that impacts our ability, economic ability. And I also think that some things may sound affordable for some workers, because I sometimes go back and forth. It said affordable housing, but affordable to whom? So
Mhm.
I think that we need to look at that. I think that workforce, I think employers, again, this is one of those things that it's going to take all of us to do, especially with what's coming at us from federal government, from the losses that we're going to sustain, from not being able to subsidize. And we have young workers enter the workforce, and then other workers that have been here for quite a while. And interesting enough, as I've talked to the community, some of the younger people, somebody mentioned it earlier about housing being, that's the way we do generational wealth, is we build wealth
Mhm.
in housing. But we may need to rediscover that and have hard conversations, because what we've been doing in the past may not work for the future. So it's going to take innovative thinking from all of us. And I have talked to young people recently, and many of them say that they're not even looking to buy a house. They don't want to
Mhm.
buy a house. They don't want to be tied down to that. So what do we do for those people that are going to rent and want to continue to rent and, make it affordable for them as well? So that's what I think that we need to do. I mean, we're going to have to do, if you look at housing and workforce programs, childcare support, transportation, all of those things are intertwined with housing kind of being the baseline because we need to keep people housed.
Mhm.
Um, so we just have a lot of work to do. I believe we have a lot of work to do as a community to bring all of these desperate pieces together and figure out how we make them work.
Yes, definitely. Alignment, collaboration. Okay, we are out of time, but Chris, I'm going to hit you with one last question to wrap us up in less than a minute. Just give us all the
Sure.
solutions of everything you've ever.
Okie
Okay, hold on.
dokie.
Let me, what promising partnerships, maybe pilot projects or funding models are you seeing that might show real potential for creating some of that alignment that Dr. Green just mentioned?
I think I haven't seen it yet, but I think an opportunity exists with the business community here. As you've heard, that this is a clear and present threat to your workforce and your bottom line as a company, as a business, whatever. Participate in the solution. You can. It's individually, a medium to small size business might not make much of a dent in a multi-million-dollar housing project, but by your powers and funds combined, pooled together, you could make a meaningful impact as an equity investor or something like that. And that's getting way out on a limb. But I think just the business community thinking, hey, this is something that worries me and I see day to day. I want to be a part of the solution. Pool your resources and eventually it'll take time, but see change in this circumstance. Don't rely strictly on cities, because when a city tries to raise taxes, you know how fraught that gets, right? So, and I just frame it as like, take Boeing, for example. Boeing, do you want to go through labor negotiations again? No, but you're going to, because the cost of living continues to rise far apace of the wages of your workers. So Boeing or others participate in addressing the other side of the solution instead of just continuing to have these grueling labor negotiations, strikes, and so on. Do the other thing,
Yeah,
and to the betterment of all.
And I
thank
know
you.
give me 15
Yes, Bobby.
seconds here. I would just add
Yes.
on. I would just add on to this. Continue to be actively engaged in these conversations, and it's not even just a shameless plug to like get involved with housing consortium discussions or other things of that nature. But we really need that collective wisdom to kind of like solve these challenges. And again, I mean, like some of the things, system response is the driver for how we're going to meet this need. And in a conventional stick-built construction model, for instance, of like building stuff, is not going to be the answer over time. So trying to get some wisdom in from the outside that helps us kind of optimize standardization of systems in the construction realm, and really kind of maybe advocating for the support of complementary offsite construction models is one example of ways that the private market and businesses could get engaged in what we're doing to try to meet needs. So just want to encourage everyone to stay involved. This coffee chat's a great start, but this conversation needs to continue.
And
Yes, it is.
and
Thank you so much.
I just want to say one more thing, just
Sure.
kind of close out. I think that the path forward is going to really require true public-private partnership, government, business, nonprofits, community organizations, all of them bringing their expertise to the table, because it's going to be difficult. It's already difficult. It's going to get more difficult. So we're going to have to work closely with all our partners and design systems that move beyond pilots and deliver real results.
I love that. Yes. And I heard that throughout today. I heard collaboration, alignment, multi-pronged solution. I also heard middle housing good. So there's an intersectionality here. There's people, of problems, of solutions. And thank you everyone for joining us today for this conversation. Gonna wrap this up real quick. So we heard today about the housing affordability is a workforce issue, a transportation issue, and an economic development issue. Snohomish County workers earning the median income can't buy a median home here. That strains our labor force, impacts our business, and threatens long-term growth. But we also heard about pathways forward, aligning policy, increasing supply, rethinking zoning maybe, exploring incentives, and partnerships across government, business, and community organizations. At EASC, we believe solutions are created through stakeholder collaboration, which we talked about a lot today. So the first step is ensuring Snohomish County remains not just a place where jobs are plentiful, but also a place where the people filling those jobs can live and thrive. Thank you again for joining us this morning, and let's continue to move this conversation into action. Before we wrap up, I want to give you a quick look ahead. On screen here, our next coffee chat will take place in October, and we'll focus on public safety. We'll be joined by local leaders to talk about how safety and security connect directly to economic vitality, workforce stability, and community well-being. We hope you'll join us for that important conversation. And coming up on September 18th, that's this week, EASC's Ambassador Program is hosting a fundraiser for Child Strive at Floral Hall in Everett. The event is called Bands, Brats, and Brews. It will feature live music, food, drinks, games, and great networking, all for a great cause. Tickets are available on our website, and all net proceeds support Child Strive's early childhood development programs right here in Snohomish County, which we talked about a lot today. So please join us there on Thursday. And don't forget, next week on Tuesday, I believe it's Wednesday actually, Wednesday, September 24th, we're hosting the Healthcare Summit at WSU Everett Auditorium. This is one of our major annual events, bringing together regional healthcare leaders to discuss access, workforce challenges, and innovations in care delivery. You can find more details and register for all three events on our website, economicalliancesc.org/events, or scan the QR code on your screen. Thank you again so much for everyone joining us here this morning. And as usual, please raise your coffee mugs or iced coffee cups, your water bottles, and let's raise our mugs to more affordable housing and a stronger Snohomish County. Take care, and we will catch you next time. Thank you for joining us.